When I was a kid, I got taken away from my mom. My mom and my dad, they were into drugs a lot. I started smoking weed a lot. I didn't care anymore. And then I started drinking in like 8th grade and started going to parties and all that.
So my life before Youth Venture, my parents did a lot of drugs. They did a lot of crystal meth. They didn't really, didn't seem like they really cared for, me or my family. Food was scarce in the house. It was just constant, a heartache. I was little, but, I can tell that there's something going wrong in the house.
I didn't have a father at a really crucial period of my life when I needed him. As I grew older and into my preteen years and junior high, I went out and did a lot of shoplifting, and I was a borderline alcoholic, and I was smoking a lot. I was just in a really bad place, and I was self-damaging, self-harming.
There's one time, me and my friends, we decided that we were going to break into Youth Venture, and we were going to Youth Venture at the time, and Jeremy actually sat down and asked us all to come into the room. He told us we were kicked out for like 3 months. As I started going to Youth Venture, after I talked to Jeremy about getting back in, I realized that there was like a lot of things wrong with me, and I needed to break loose of all that stuff. I started realizing like, this is what I've needed all my life. Like, this is what I'm gonna start doing every day. And when I come here.
7th and 8th grade, I remember always going to Youth Venture, and around that time, I was living in my van with my mom, my dad, and 2 of my other siblings. One day, I was at Youth Venture. My dad walked up, and I asked him why he was here. It was too early. It was like 4 o'clock, and he told me that the van got impounded and that he knew where he was going to stay, but he didn't know about us, and he walked off. The church helped my family out a lot. We started living in motels and then soon into an apartment. Around 10th grade, people started really encouraging me to go to Future Quest. So I ended up going, and from then on out, through Future Quest, my life changed.
My mom was diagnosed with cancer. We couldn't see her as much because she had to stay in her bedroom. After she was diagnosed, she couldn't hold a job because she got sick too often. It was hard for us to get food on the table. The Claytons bought food for us. Eric took us up to Walmart and just blessed us with buying us food and stuff.
One day, a man brought me into Youth Venture. Over the next months, I was doing lessons with the guy, and he spoke a lot into my life, and what he said really convicted me about the way I was living. There came a crossroads point in my life where I had to decide whether I was going to live for Jesus and for righteousness, or whether I was going to live for sin in the world. I decided to follow Jesus. If I hadn't, people used to say that they thought I would be dead.
I wouldn't know God, I wouldn't know anything about Him. I wouldn't have the Christian friends I have. I wouldn't have my small group. It showed me leaders, like I can look up to leaders that love God. Just Youth Venture changed my life so much, and I'm so thankful for it.
Because of Youth Venture, now I'm a strong Christian. I'm a high school small group leader, and I'm a junior staff. Because of Youth Venture, I love God.
The influence that Youth Venture had in my life has just been so profound. I'm a worship leader. I'm involved with junior high ministry. I'm back involved with Youth Venture volunteering in the junior staff.
Youth Venture was kind of like a second family to me. I found out like there's people there who care for me. Like they want to see me do good. They want to see me walking a life with God. They saw the potential that I had, and now I'm a junior staff and small group leader because of Youth Venture.
Because of Youth Venture, I do a Tuesday group at Greenfield Middle School, Higher Ground. I lead 2 high school small groups. Youth Venture has been there my whole life. I remembered exactly how they treated me and how the leaders treated me, and it made me want to be just like them.
Before I started going to Youth Venture, in the 5th grade, before I had started going, there was a lot of angerness in my household. I became a bully at my school. I would take all my anger and my pain and my hurt, and I would just throw it onto someone else.
Before I came to Youth Venture, I used to be Muslim, and there just wasn't that peace. We just didn't like Christians and the way what they believe in and how they think Jesus is the Lord.
There was a time in my life where my dad was unemployed, and because of that we had to live in our car for about 6 months and then in a hotel for about 7 months. I remember times in our car where my dad would give us the option of, do you want to spend the night in a hotel and take a shower, or do you want to get some food? And there was times where we chose food, there was times where we chose a hotel, just depending how we were feeling.
My friend Alex invited me one day to Youth Venture, and after a couple of weeks I met this leader named Curtis, and he showed me around what they say in the lessons.
There was just this genuine care that really separates something that isn't godly from something that is godly, and it was there, and it was real.
There was also something else that I hadn't seen yet, and that was a true love that I had not yet ever experienced in my home, and what I later found out was God's love for me.
After I was doing a lot of lessons, I had a dream about Jesus, and he was a good shepherd, and I saw him, and he took my mom first, and that was a symbol of my mom. She was being Christian, and then me and my brothers. And then after that, I just knew I had to accept Jesus into my heart, so I did it.
Because of you, I was once a broken, lost kid who was taking his angers out, and now I'm giving the love that Christ gave me.
So because of you guys and Youth Venture, my life was looking like a broken wreck, and now through just a personal relationship with Christ, I have this wonderful hope for my future. I'm just excited to see what God has in store for me.
Now, after 2 years in Youth Venture, I'm a junior staff, and I'm a good influence on my friends. And me and my brothers and my mom, now we go to Foothills Christian Church.
I was born in Hawaii in 1995, and my dad was out at sea when I was born, so I was born to my mother when she had my older brother and my half-brother and my half-sister. My mother, she became a drunk, and she struggled to raise us. And when my dad returned home from seas, he had to get a divorce because she was unwilling to quit drinking. We moved to California, and my dad had the stress of having to raise 4 kids on his own, which eventually he couldn't handle anymore, so he had to send my half-brother and my half-sister back to Hawaii with their mother. One day in 4th grade, my dad was at work and he caught his boss stealing, and in order to not get caught, he fired my dad. Now this was a really tough time for my dad, and the rent was due, and my dad didn't have it. So what ended up happening was we ended up just living in our car for about 6 months. Now looking back, that was one of the greatest situations and circumstances I went through, because it's really made me who I am. But it was a really tough time for me and my brother and my dad, just having to live in a car together. Then we ended up moving into a Days Inn, where we lived for about maybe another 6 months. And because of this whole 1 year without a home, I didn't go to school after 4th grade for a year. When we were living in our car, I remember there was times where my dad had like $50 and he'd say, do we want to buy food or do we want to spend a night in a hotel so you guys can take a shower? And sometimes we choose food, sometimes we choose the hotel. Eventually my dad met a man when he was in the car. He ended up helping us move into an apartment in Lakeside, where I started going back to 5th grade at Linda Park Elementary School. And there I actually attended Sunshine Club, which is their after school Bible club, and that's when I started getting to know who God was. I continued in Lakeside onto Tierra del Sol Middle School, where I attended their Higher Ground. I continued just to know who God was, to get to know who God was,
but I never really had a relationship with him at all. It was just a knowledge of who he was. One day in 7th grade, I just decided to check out a teen center that I heard around called Youth Venture. The first time that I really realized how impacting Youth Venture was for my life was during the incoming summer of my freshman year. This was a really hard time for me and my family where food was scarce in our home almost. There was a time when me and my brother would have a packet of ramen, and we'd have the ramen, the noodles for one meal, and we'd have the packet of seasoning for another meal. And then we walked down 3.5 miles down to Youth Venture for just a dinner, because we knew that there was going to be dinner, we knew that we could depend upon it, and we just knew that there was people there that really wanted us to thrive. And then my incoming sophomore year, the summer of my incoming sophomore year, that's when my mentor invited me to church, and I finally decided to take up his offer. It was just a crazy experience. I loved going to church. I loved the weekly interaction with the people there that really, I could tell, just loved God. I started going to their high school group, and then the next week there was the Sacred Assembly, and that's where I really first met with God. That's where I first felt His presence. And soon after that, I attended their summer camp, where it was my first camp, and just the Spirit of God fell, and I realized that it was finally time for me to work my life around my relationship with God and just to live for Him. About a week later, after summer camp, that's when I decided to truly finish giving my life to the Lord by getting baptized at Foothills Christian Church in August of 2011. Now I'm just 14 months after attending Foothills Christian Church for the first time. I'm a small group leader. I do a junior staff. I lead 2 higher grounds. Through Youth Venture and through Foothills Christian Church, able to attend Foothills Christian High School for the first time this year, which has just been an incredible blessing in itself, because I've just had so much growth just from starting going to that school. And I know that none of this would have been possible if I hadn't walked through Youth Venture that first time 4 years ago. I come back continuously because I just love to serve for what they've given me. I just really enjoy the fact that I get to serve as the junior staff on my shift, knowing that I can serve them because they served me so much when I was going through a hard time. And even continually as I'm going through hard times now, I know that I can depend upon Youth Venture, and I know that they'd be more than willing just to help me out and bless me.